Israel holds up food supplies to Gaza, further worsening an already dire humanitarian situation. But can the blockade policy weaken Hamas's hold on Gaza, or is the group turning the situation to its political advantage? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Lauren Taylor. A moment of relief followed by days of misery. Well, that moment of relief was supposed to be on Thursday, as Gazans waited for Israel to open its crossings, which had been sealed for over a week. However, it didn't happen. A UN official said they now won't be able to deliver food to some 750,000 Gaza residents beginning on Friday. Shireen Tadros gives us a glimpse of just how difficult it is to have a normal life in one of the most impoverished and densely populated areas in the world.
1.5 million people living on a 40-kilometre-long coastal strip, surrounded by an occupying power that controls almost every part of their lives. Amal feeds her 2-month-old baby Sharif powdered milk brought in from Israel. When Israel closes the crossings into Gaza, the powder gets very expensive as supplies diminish. In the past, she's been forced to feed Sharif aniseed mixed with water until the UN can give her milk. It's the uncertainty of her situation that she finds so hard.
It's scary. Some days we find ourselves without enough food and milk. Even the electricity. It comes on one day, goes off the next. What kind of life is this?
But milk supply is just one example of Israel's control over the Strip. There are 4 crossing points into Gaza. Israel has full control over 3 of these. Through Karni and Sofa, they allow the trickling in of supplies such as hygienic products, vegetables and meat. More than half the population here depend on UN handouts, again supplied by Israel. In the past year and a half, as Israel's siege over Gaza has tightened, even the UN has run out of basic supplies.
I'm sorry to say we've come to this point far too often. This is not new news from Gaza. This is a repeat, and it's the same cycle every time. People are taken to the brink of despair, and then there is a moment of relief, which is insufficient to return people to a dignified existence, of course, and then it goes on until we have another brink of despair again.
And it's that lack of food security, say experts, that causes severe anxiety.
For the people, for any human being to enjoy a good mental health, he or she has to enjoy certain basic needs. First, food, shelters, etc. And second, which is one of the main basic needs, is to feel secure.
Whether it be a shortage in fuel today or food tomorrow, for Gazans, the constant worry over whether they'll have enough basic necessities for their families has become part of everyday life and another layer of Israel's occupation. Shireen Tadros, Al Jazeera, Gaza.
Well, joining our discussion are our guests in London, Azam Tamimi, author on Hamas and director of the Institute of Islamic Political Thought. In Tel Aviv, we're joined by Dan Shufton, director of the National Security Studies Centre at the University of Haifa. And from Brussels, Chris Davis, a member of the European Union's parliamentary delegation to the Palestinian Legislative Council. Thank you very much indeed, all of you, for being with us. If I could start with you, Dan Shufton. We've heard that condemnation from the UN agency that's supposed to be looking after civilians in the Gaza Strip. Why is Israel persisting with this blockade and not lifting it?
Well, first of all, the day that the UN will stop demanding things from Israel and demonstrating against Israel and being anti-Israeli will be a new day. This is an anti-Israeli organization. Only recently, when Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, who speaks about the destruction of Israel, spoke before the General Assembly, the president of the General Assembly stepped down to embrace him, just to encourage this kind of attitude. And every day the UN is condemning Israel. We're just expecting one day that they'll accuse us of killing the Dead Sea. It's a ridiculous situation, and I suggest we simply don't take the UN seriously when it comes to Israel.
Well, an Israeli-based human rights organisation has accused Israel of collective punishment, so it's not just the UN, but there are other organisations as well.
No, but this is a radical left organization, and you have such in Israel as well. that are part of the propaganda effort of the people in Gaza. So let's discuss the real issues and not these propaganda condemnations, and I'll be delighted to answer questions concerning the real issues that are at stake. I simply suggest that we don't take seriously these allegations.
Chris Davis, do you think that's fair, that the UN is biased, or do you think that there is genuine suffering from the Palestinian people?
Oh, I know there's genuine suffering. I find the accusation that the UN is somehow anti-Israeli just ridiculous. I mean, how do you start to deal with a situation when the UN is dismissed in such terms? I think the Israeli psychology here is very difficult to understand. Now, I assume that the whole strategy is based on the idea that the people will turn against Hamas. It seems to me that the reverse is likely to be the case, that although Hamas to many people may be seen as a bunch of rogues, at least they're our rogues, and they're seen to be standing up to the common oppressor. And the oppressor is Israel. And I think Israelis need to try and see themselves in the reverse situation. If they were being oppressed in this way, would they somehow surrender their leaders? Would they somehow give up? I don't think so. I think their strength would be their resolution would be strengthened, and they would support the leaders, however bad they may be. Okay. So I think Israel simply needs to rethink its whole strategy.
Azam Tamimi, Israel blames Hamas for the situation in Gaza. It said recently that Hamas is responsible for the situation in Gaza and the suffering of the civilian population there. Hamas uses its resources for terror rather than the care of civilian needs. And given that more rockets have been fired, I suppose they might have a point, mightn't they?
Well, Hamas has been observing a truce which was violated by the Israelis. These rockets started falling on Israeli villages and towns neighboring Gaza simply because the Israelis penetrated into Gaza and killed several Hamas fighters or members of Izz al-Qassam last week and also yesterday. And these facts are for all to see. However, I regret to say that the Israeli untenable, unacceptable and immoral position is strengthened by the world community that is led by the United States of America, because had it not been for this position by the world community that is punishing the Palestinians for having elected Hamas, none of this would have happened. It is further strengthened by a country like Egypt, which continues to close the Rafah crossing most of the time, although Israel has no direct access or no direct control over the crossing. It is also further strengthened by Mahmoud Abbas and his Ramallah Authority, who don't want to see the siege come to an end because it would mean a success for Hamas. It's a very sad situation.
Dan Shufton, in general terms, do you think that this idea of a blockade can actually achieve anything in the long term? I mean, it doesn't seem to be helping anyone at this stage, does it?
Well, let's look at the broad picture. What you have in Gaza is Hamas, an anti-Semitic organization who calls for the destruction of the State of Israel and says that it will continue to fight in order to destroy Israel militarily. They shoot deliberately into civilian populations while they're getting their electricity from Israel, their food from Israel, everything that they're getting from Israel, and then they're lying. For instance, they're saying there is no electricity when 70% of the electricity is coming from Israel, 30% is coming from Egypt, and they are lying simply by showing pictures of people standing with candles, when if you look carefully at the background, you'll see that the street lamps are lit. So
Tamimi, can I just bring you in on that point? Is there deception going on over the real state situation in Gaza?
Well, if the Palestinians in Gaza, or if Hamas is lying, as your guest from Israel is saying, why is Israel closing the crossings, and why Israel is shutting down the supply of oil or whatever? And the reason actually Gaza needs these things from Israel is that this is the only way that is available, because the rest of the world is punishing Gaza. The rest of the world is imposing sanctions on Gaza and leaving Gaza under the mercy of these merciless Israelis. That's the reason.
Chris Davis, can I bring you in? The policy of sanctions, and the international community's policy on this, do you think that it's time to revise it?
I do. And I do wonder why, and just listening to this debate emphasises it, why we seem to spend all our time exploiting the differences of all sides in the conflict rather than trying to explore common ground. A year or so ago, I was talking to Ismail Haniyeh in Gaza during the time when he was Prime Minister of the short-lived Palestinian Unity government. And he divorced himself from the Hamas position in that role. He made it clear that he supported, he accepted the right of Israel to exist. Or as Prime Minister of that government, he accepted that right. He disputed the borders. But then we don't know what the borders of Israel are. We wait to hear exactly what the borders of Israel should be. It's a question that needs to be answered. In the meantime, I think the European Union's position is, well, it's deplorable, really. We are the main funders of the Palestinian Authority. We funded the Palestinian elections, and yet we refused to accept the result. And since then, we've really tried to very much follow American leadership, the White House leadership, while satisfying our consciences by giving money to try and provide some sort of relief to ordinary Palestinians.
Okay,
I think we just have to understand that the average Palestinian just wants to get on with their lives. They want to end all this and just be allowed to ensure that their children have a better education. They're able to start having a better standard of life. They're not all trying to destroy the state of Israel.
OK, on that note, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, we'll be asking what is behind the international community's reluctance to help civilians in poverty-stricken Gaza. Do stay with us here on Inside Story.